My mother-in-law sneered. Earning only $750 a month is like pocket money for a college student. Don't even part-time workers make more? Having a wife with such a low income is embarrassing. Maybe you should consider a divorce so our son can find someone better. After all, he's the ultimate triple threat. She kept making these cutting remarks after seeing what she thought was my pay stub, but it wasn't even mine. My name is Amanda. I'm a 32-year-old nurse, married to John for 5 years. We met during college at a party. He was studying medicine, and I was in nursing. Our relationship grew, and we eventually got married. John hasn't passed the medical licensing exam yet, having failed twice and taken a 3-year break. Right now, he's working part-time while studying hard to pass the exam. I work full-time as a nurse, so I'm the main source of income. John isn't one to flaunt wealth or post pictures of expensive cars on social media. Instead, he's serious about his work, reading stories of those who've lost loved ones, tracking the spread of infectious diseases, and studying literature on healthcare in Japan. I've always respected him. Even though he's not a doctor yet, his desire to save lives is genuine. So I didn't abandon him despite the financial strain as he entered his 30s. He kept the fact that he's not a licensed doctor from his parents. John apologized. Sorry, my mom is just too nosy. It's fine, I assured him. I support you, so don't worry about your parents. Live your life the way you want. This is just a phase. We decided to keep his situation a secret. Since he worked nights as a security guard at the hospital where I'm employed, he could easily keep up the appearance of being a doctor. He had enough knowledge to talk like one, so no one, including his parents who saw him infrequently, suspected otherwise. When they asked, I would say, yes, the patients really like him. I believe that while harsh truths can hurt, sometimes kind lies can save people. Telling a patient, you have 3 months left with no hope of recovery, can be more damaging than saying, you look good today, and you ate well. It's just how people are. My mother-in-law, however, is nothing like my honest and serious husband. She's the typical overbearing type, always looking down on me for being just a nurse married to her son, the doctor. There must have been so many better choices, like a beautiful dermatologist, she'd say with a dismissive wave. I always apologized and bowed my head when she spoke like that. I fully support my husband in his journey to becoming a doctor, even though right now, he's just a high school graduate with a wealth of medical knowledge working part-time. He's not even an intern yet, but John is genuinely grateful, always saying, thank you for everything, so I silently continue to support him. In reality, I'm also swamped with work. Our combined income was barely enough to scrape by, but I never let it bother me. I didn't enter this profession for the money. I was inspired by Florence Nightingale and the difference she made in the world. I currently work as a nurse in internal medicine, one of the most demanding fields. I've never been motivated by money. As long as we have enough to live, eat, and stay healthy, that's all that matters. Isn't that what life is really about? Even though I'm the one supporting my husband's living expenses and tuition, my mother-in-law goes around telling everyone in the neighborhood, my son is a doctor and makes good money. If John were a serious doctor, he wouldn't want his mother bragging about his income, whether it was high or low. But my mother-in-law is obsessed with money, and that's all she talks about. John has no choice but to endure it quietly. She has no idea that he's actually working as a security guard in uniform at the hospital instead of striding around in a white coat, as she loves to imagine. Even if he were doing that, it wouldn't be something to boast about or gossip over. I understand her feelings, but there should be some restraint. I worry that all this pressure might affect John's mental state and cause him to fail the medical licensing exam again. He's barely hanging on to the hope of becoming a doctor. If he ends up spending his life as a security guard after all his efforts, it would be a tragedy. His personality is well suited for being a doctor. His only flaw is that he's too kind. My mother-in-law, meanwhile, goes around speculating, saying things like, my son makes $373,000 a year. Knowing that's a lie only adds more stress for John. I once gently tried to voice my concerns. Amanda, I think it might be better for patients if you didn't talk so much about his job. It could cause issues. After all, if you were a patient, would you want to see a doctor whose mother is constantly boasting about him when you're unwell? But my mother-in-law couldn't care less. Mother-in-law, shut up. You're just a nurse. You should be grateful you married a doctor. That's luckier than winning a $3 million lottery. Money can't buy status. You nursing school graduate. She continued to hurl verbal abuse. Amanda, yes. I'm sorry. Thank you for letting me marry John. I respect him both as a doctor and as a person. So please just let him be. Mother-in-law, you're so irritating. We can still make him divorce you and find someone better. It would be a tragedy if our future grandchild inherited your low IQ genes. This was beyond harassment. It felt like a violation of my basic rights, but I stayed silent. Compared to the life and death situations I face at work and my sense of duty as a nurse, my mother-in-law's sarcasm seemed insignificant. I didn't take her words to heart. But as those days dragged on, the inevitable finally happened. My in-laws live about a 30-minute express train ride from our house, so we don't visit often, and with my busy work schedule, I haven't spent much time around them, which is why this lie has managed to hold up. However, whether out of boredom or impatience, my mother-in-law decided to show up at our house unannounced. Mother-in-law, what a cramped little place. Why does my pride and joy have to live in such a shabby house? Amanda, mother-in-law. She glanced at the row of medical books, her eyes narrowing. Mother-in-law, well, he is my son, after all. She snapped a picture with her phone. I felt a pang of anxiety. Most of the books were study materials for the national medical exam. With this year's editions visible, it would be clear that John was still a student. My nerves were on edge, my heart racing, fearing that our secret might be exposed. I did my best to manage the situation and keep her from uncovering too much. Mother-in-law, I'm sorry, we're both swamped with work, so we haven't had a chance to find a bigger place. Especially recently, I subtly tried to encourage her to leave. But then she began rummaging through our home. What are these strange dishes? If you're married to a doctor, you should be using Wedgwood. Yes, I'm sorry, they're from the dollar store. What? The dollar store? I'm throwing these out. No, we couldn't afford luxuries because we were investing in John's textbooks and tuition, so we cut costs on things like plates that didn't impact our simple meals. As long as they served the purpose, that was all that mattered. For now, passing the exam was our top priority. Fortunately, John was working as a security guard at the hospital at that time. I was relieved he wasn't home, as I didn't want to see him hurt by her actions. I hoped to get my mother-in-law to leave before he returned, but she continued to go through our belongings. I'm throwing away these clothes that look like a student's. If you're married to a doctor, you should be wearing high-end branded clothes. She discarded John's favorite clothes. Then she came across. What's this? A cheap watch? If you're married to a doctor, you should have a luxury watch. She tossed it aside, clearly oblivious to the convenience of a smartwatch. The items she was throwing away had been bought with the small amount of money John had earned. He would have preferred recognition for his work with patients rather than having his pride diminished as he stood guard. Still, he was diligently working toward his dream, but there was no stopping her now. It's because he married a poor girl that you live like this, even though he's a doctor. It's a wonder you don't live in a mansion. Unbelievable. I was thinking of taking you shopping so you could buy me a designer bag or something. Her statement was utterly despicable. I had to point out that my mother-in-law's expectations for my husband, whether he was a student or not, were far removed from our reality. As a fellow medical professional, I had no interest in gold digging for a doctor. Mother-in-law, I don't mean to be blunt, but he's not one for extravagance. Our current lifestyle works for us. I tried to convey this casually, but my mother-in-law wouldn't relent. You're so frustrating. Do you have any idea how hard he worked to get into medical school? We've been waiting to recover his upbringing and tuition fees, and it's all your fault that we're in this situation. Don't be absurd. She continued her relentless search of our home, going through the kitchen, every closet, and discarding anything she deemed cheap. Incredibly, she even began opening the clear cases where we kept our utility bills, mail, and other paperwork. That's when she stumbled upon the pay stubs. Marked at $750, 25. They clearly had my husband's name on them. Whether she didn't see or couldn't read the details, she erupted. $750. What do you mean $750? You're a nurse. That's not my son's daily wage. Even anesthesiologists make $750 a day. How can you? the wife of an internist, only be making $7.50. Are you slacking off at work? She began to lose control. That's why you're living in such poverty, you're just a money grubber. Huh, pretending to be a nurse while deceiving a doctor. You're only a part-time nurse because it sounds good. $750 is nothing, just quit already. That money was earned through John's hard work, enduring the dismissive glances of younger doctors, biting his lip, and working in the gaps between his study hours for a minimal wage. It was a modest, yet honest amount, but my mother-in-law's fury only escalated. You're a poor, misfortune-bringing wife. Divorce him immediately. At that moment, I heard the front door slam. John had come home from his part-time job. His face went pale when he saw his clothes and watch thrown into a trash bag. He began to pick them up, handling each item with care, but my mother-in-law spoke up. John, I don't mean to be harsh, but please consider divorcing this wife of yours. With your education, high income, and nearly 6 foot height, why did you end up with someone so pitiful? It's heartbreaking that she only earns $750. John remained silent, his lips tightly pressed together. My mother-in-law continued, her voice dripping with disdain. I'll bring the divorce papers for you. Leave this shabby room and this woman who smells of disinfectant behind. Remarry someone better. As a doctor, it's expected. John slowly stood up and finally spoke. Mom, I've kept quiet about this, but I'm not a doctor yet. What? I'm sorry for keeping it from you, but I haven't passed the national exam yet. And that $750. My mother-in-law, taken aback, turned to me in confusion. I don't understand. That $750 pay stub must be yours, right? I decided it was pointless to keep it a secret and replied. No, it's not mine. John added. That's my salary from my part-time job. That can't be, you must be lying. I'm not lying, it's true. I'm not a doctor yet, I've failed the national exam twice. Shocked by the revelation, my mother-in-law began acting erratically. She slipped on some newspapers she had scattered earlier and fell hard on the floor. She tried to catch herself but ended up breaking her right arm with a loud crack. It was definitely a fracture. John and I quickly took her to the hospital and guided her to the orthopedic department. Once there, John said, Mom, I'm sorry, but please don't come to our house anymore, and I don't want you to consider me your son. My mother-in-law was trembling from shock, but John continued firmly. I tolerated your boasting about me, even though I felt guilty for not being honest, but when you insulted the money I worked so hard to earn, that was the last straw. But I never would have guessed you weren't a doctor. It doesn't matter whether I'm a doctor or not. Do you think I'm studying just to make $750 a day? I'm an adult, and it's clear we have irreconcilable differences. It's time to part ways. It became clear that John was determined to cut ties with his mother, my mother-in-law, who had found her sole purpose in life through boasting about her son, seemed utterly disheartened. These days, she stays isolated at home, too embarrassed to face her neighbors. That same year, John passed the medical licensing exam. Though he was a bit older, he began working as a resident physician, excelling in his role and maintaining his kindness, like offering tea to the security guards. Our lives became peaceful and happy. If only she had waited a little longer, she would have seen her dream realized and watched him in his white coat. It's truly a shame, but she brought it upon herself.